Now, he also says with regard to the Aiyuk situation that, hey, ho-hum, we do this every offseason. And as players, what the hell can you do about it anyway? You just go play. This is completely all over your head. And nobody even knows if Brandon is due for the Bay Area tomorrow or not. I don't know. He may show up. I doubt it. But then again, I don't even know what does not showing up achieve. I don't even know what that does. What does that do for Brandon?
You send a message, and
I think the message has been sent.
You resend it. Don't press send. Well, in this case, he will press send. I'm not saying that the message is going to...
Yeah.
He doesn't show up, and then Parag trembles up in the office, and he immediately reaches into the bag and finds a couple more million, and he calls Brandon Aiyuk's agent and says, all right, he didn't show up today. You guys win. We capitulate. It's a capitulation sensation. You get everything you want and more. Brandon, please show up. I don't think that a no-show does anything other than, maybe percolate the headlines on Niners Wire.
And get you fined.
If they so choose.
If they so choose. Well, they will to start. They will. They can forgive them later.
Yeah, they can. But
they're not going to not start. What are they going to do? Just be like, no, we're not fining you at all.
They're going to fine him, and then we're all going to do the math and add up the fines. And after 2 or 3 weeks, when they finally come to terms, then the story will be, and they've agreed as part of the deal to excuse $575,000 in fines, and everything will be fine.
You think they're coming to terms? So you and I have actually gone on the same premise for a while. And I'm telling you that when I changed my opinion, I changed all of them. All of them.
Yeah.
I don't think they're signing him to an extension. And in fact, if you really want to take the time, this isn't just because I watched a documentary. If you really want to take the time to look at the Niners books in the way that we can, like I don't have every single piece of graph paper in front of me, but if you really want to look at the Niners books, I think I'd argue that signing Aiyuk now makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
Unless you're dead set on Debo walking at the end of the year.
Well, I don't know how you can be dead set on anything in the NFL. There's too much injury risk. So, yes, I understand that extensions happen, but this is a special circumstance. I wonder if we would all just stop and acknowledge this. This is a special circumstance, and that is what Brandon doesn't want to hear. This isn't the Eagles with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. This is a special set of circumstances. This is the best roster in the NFL. It is the best roster in the NFL with a quarterback making less than $1 million. That's about to change. There are multiple receivers, one already being paid, another wanting to be paid, and as you've pointed out, the team that throws the ball the least in the entire league. It is a team that is absolutely beyond obsessed with winning the Super Bowl this year. It is a team that is already over the cap in 2025, the following year, before their quarterback signs an extension. Put all of that into a bucket, and we've got ourselves a damn situation. And so that's why I think it's very funny when you hear the Mike Florios of the world say stuff like this.
I think it was the trade compensation that ultimately kept it from happening, that no one offered enough to get the 49ers to pull the trigger. And I don't know whether or not this is a situation where the 49ers had their bluff called by Brandon Aiyuk's camp, because this didn't happen as a result of Aiyuk wanting to be traded. That happened recently with the formal request to be traded. Back before the draft, it was he wanted to be paid a certain amount of money. The 49ers didn't want to pay it. And at some point, it was decided, let's see if someone else will pay him what the 49ers won't. The 49ers authorized that effort, and they found out that there were 5 teams that were willing to pay the 49ers, or to pay Aiyuk, excuse me, what the 49ers wouldn't pay him. And, at some point, you got to wake up if you're Jed York or Parag Marate or John Lynch, whoever's got the fingers on the purse strings. If there are 5 other teams that recognize the value in Brandon Aiyuk to the point where they'll pay him what the 49ers won't and give something up to get him, even if it wasn't sufficient to get the deal done. At some point, you got to look at that and go, yeah, we should probably just pay this guy what he wants, because other teams view him with more value than we do.
So Florio was on this morning with Bonte and Joe, and he said that. And I thought that the last few sentences there were just beyond insane. At some point, the Niners brass needs to wake up and realize that other teams want to pay Brandon, so they should too. The Patriots are reportedly one of the teams that was willing to pay Brandon. Let me check. The Patriots have no other good players on their roster at all, and just handed the quarterback position to a brand new rookie who they don't need to worry about for at minimum 4 years. So if the Patriots are willing to do it, what the hell does that have to do with the San Francisco 49ers? I'd argue nothing.
Yeah, nothing right now. And it might have something to do with at the end of the year. Then maybe Brandon Aiyuk signs with the Patriots. If they have all this money and they want to pay him, then go ahead and pay him. If the Niners don't want to match it or they don't want to pay him more, then they get a comp pick and they move on. Doesn't mean that you had to trade him before the draft if the compensation you were going to get back was not as good as what you thought was going to be commensurate with trading a player who you think can help you win the Super Bowl. You're in a Super Bowl window. You have a player who was second-team All-Pro, I believe, last year, and a guy who's really good in your offense for a team that fancies itself as being a good team. So why would you take less than absolute maximum value for him back in April? And then the draft passes, and now you're not going to trade him because you're not going to trade him for a pick next year when you're in a Super Bowl window.
Yeah, plus, by the way, the 49ers now, I know this is difficult because they sit over the cap for next year, not this year, next year right now. So there will need to be sacrifices made next offseason. But by the way, I'd argue they still don't have to be one of the receivers. It doesn't have to be. And I know you've argued probably correctly that the Niners would never do this. But the 49ers have every right to sit here right now and go, Brandon, you will play for $14.1 million this year. And then next year, when you're even more mad, we're going to franchise tag you. And while Brock Purdy's extension will be signed, it does because he doesn't kick in until 2026. So we'll go ahead and just pay you $29 million on the franchise tag for 2025. Let's make that a 2-year, $43 million deal, $21.5 per year. Basically, for this year and next year. And then Debo moves another year into his contract, and we'll just figure it out after that. So then we've got 2 full seasons of Ricky Pearsall. We've got 2 more years of information on Purdy and Aiyuk and Debo, and everybody's contracts are 2 more years down the road. Is Trent Williams ready to retire? Is Juszczyk retiring? What's happening with Kittle? Does Greenlaw play? Like all of that. They could do that. I doubt it, but that is within their right in the collective bargaining agreement to do it. So I chuckle every time I hear, there's 2 things you hear people say right now. Will you just pay Brandon because he's good. So just pay him. Just do it. And then the other thing people will say, and if you don't want to do that, well, then do the right thing and trade him. No.
Right.
What are we talking about? Do the right thing. You want to do the right thing, get rid of artificial turf. They're not going to do that either.
No, the right thing is to pay him what you are contracted to pay him. $14.1 million. It's what he's contracted to be paid to play football this year. That's what you have to do if you're the 49ers. That's the deal. It's the deal he signed when he was a rookie. It was slotted, first rounder, 5th-year option, all the rest of it we all know. He's getting $14 million. Now, you would like to give him an extension that works for both parties, but if he is dead set against signing for $26 million, and we haven't heard much about that alleged offer in a long time, that offer might not exist anymore.
I'm glad you said alleged. I'm not convinced that it ever did. I'm not, like, when you look at the Niners situation, I don't know that it makes sense to sign him to an extension at all. I just don't know that it does. It firmly knocks 3, 4, or 5 49ers that you really like out the door after this year.
When I'm looking at the numbers for next year, Trent's making 34. Debo's making 24. Mooney's making 12. Bosa's making 20. That's his cap hit, but his actual number in cash is much greater. Warner's $29 million on the cap hit. So, and he's a prime candidate for a restructure because you want him around. You pay him some of that cash up front, and then you prorate the signing bonus. But Javon Hargrave, $28 million. Got a lot of big contracts that are sticking around for next year. So if Brandon's making, let's just call it 26, that puts you a firm $60 million over the cap next year.
Yeah, why would they do that? And by the way, if Brandon's going to sign a deal, it's not just going to kick in next year. In theory, it would be at least a 4-year deal after this year, which means you have to figure out 2026 when Brock kicks in at $50-some-odd million. I mean, listen, I'm doing this without looking at the books right now, but it feels to me, if you sign Brandon Aiyuk to an extension right now, you're signing up for 2026. Like, you got to kick everybody out the door. You got to kick probably half of your favorite 49ers out the door. I just don't know. I mean, the more, and I want to retract a lot of the opinions that I've thrown out there the last couple of weeks because I don't know. I just look at it differently now. I look at it differently now, and I also don't know what to trust. Okay, so it's public. They offered him $26 a year. I'm not saying I think that that's bad reporting. I don't know if what the reporters are being told is 100% true. You know, Brandon was upset that number was made public, but it's like, so that sort of makes it feel like, well, it was probably true, or else Brandon would have said so because he's been really chirpy this offseason. But I just don't know.
Maybe think about what Brandon himself has said. He said that right after the Super Bowl, they started negotiating, and there was a time early in the process where he had his suit ready.
Yeah.
He was getting ready to put the suit on and come shake a hand and take a picture and sign a deal. So at that point, there was some deal on the table that he at least kind of liked, and then all those other deals came out, whop, 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 and his number changed or whatever happened between then and now. It doesn't seem like he has a suit ready anymore.
No, and then I also wonder, like, did the Niners make an offer that they knew he would refuse? That's playing a little bit too much of, a game of chicken, so I doubt that. I think the Niners are more straightforward than that, but at the same time, like, the more I look at this now, the more I realize the way they structure things around Debo, the tone setter that he is in that locker room, the fact that if you do look at the way Ricky Pearsall plays or is supposed to play, who does that look like they're replacing? Not Debo.
Yeah, correct.
You know what I mean? Like, so I just, you see the puzzle pieces move around, and I'm like, I don't think it's that the Niners offered something and then pulled it, but I just don't know if it makes sense to re-sign him. It's cap schmap, so there's always a way. But goodness me, they're like, I get it. And this is one of the rare situations where I'm not siding with the team, but I understand where they're coming from. I understand where the 49ers are coming from. Signing Aiyuk to an extension right now is incredibly complicated.
I think if you do that, you are saying goodbye to Debo at the end of the year. And I think that, maybe it's the Receivers doc on Netflix that you and I are both watching that's changing our opinion or changing our sense about Debo. I think if you give Aiyuk an extension, you realize you can't pay both of them that much. And I know cap schmap, you can always work through the cap, but as I'm looking at next year's salaries and some of these big names who are making north of 10, north of 15, and you got Bosa, and if Trent's still around, Trent's worth every penny. And you got Kittle, who's going to be making a huge number. He's on the books for $22 million in 2025. So like you said, you're going to have to say goodbye to a lot of your favorites. So for me, if you do sign Aiyuk to an extension, it becomes him or Debo. And if you don't sign him to an extension, well, you have 1 year of him and Debo, and then maybe you could work something out after that.
And I'm just of the opinion, like, and I hope it didn't come off different than this earlier. I'm no different than everybody else. I love a good wide receiver, and my goodness, I think that the 49er offense needs good wide receivers. But if it is at the expense of trench warfare, if it is at the expense of edge rushers, if it is at the expense of having good tackles, if it is at the expense of having good linebackers, it is not worth it. I would take a little dip at the wide receiver position way before I took a dip at any of those other positions.
Of course, edge rusher, left tackle, cornerback. These are all positions that you need to have a premium player. And Mooney Ward is a guy who has played pretty darn well for you. And he's a guy who's also going to be looking for an extension. And you rework McCaffrey and gave him a little bit more money, and he's top of the market, and Kittle's near the top of the market. And these are players who are probably as important, if not more important, than wide receiver to this team.
Niners know what they're doing. Niners, that's the other thing. And I know some people go, what about Solomon Thomas? I'm not saying that they're perfect with every decision. I'm saying that when it comes to this, when it comes to negotiating, when it comes to running the numbers and having a plan, that is probably where I trust the 49ers absolutely the most. They're not getting caught with their pants down here. They're not sitting here going, my God, I thought
really snuck up on us.
I thought this would have been figured out by now. Oh, crap. They're strategically, is there a mistake or two? I think that they got beat in the Bosa conversation last year, no doubt. But it's not like it caught them off guard.
The DeForest Buckner didn't work out the way they wanted.
No, that was it. Again, that's you can make a bad trade. My point is these numbers, the Niners have run these, and they've got a plan. And Brandon getting what Brandon wants doesn't fit their plan.
It's interesting, though, because they've always said their philosophy is draft a player, like a player, pay the player. And they've done that with every single player. Buckner was the one, and they made that decision early in the process, and they traded him before the draft. They got a pick. They blew the pick. I didn't like the pick. I didn't like the player. But that's water under the bridge now. That's one that they went about a certain way, but they did it in March. And then this one, you draft a player, they like the player, and then you're going to pay the player, and yet it feels for the first time like that might not be the way this goes.
Sometimes you get to the end of the road. Shout out Boys to Men. You get to the end of the road, which is like all of those situations before have either been obvious situations that you budgeted for or players that you flat out are unwilling to move on from, like a Nick Bosa. But all those other situations, Kittle and Warner and everything, that all happened before you acquired Christian McCaffrey. That all happened before quarterbacks were making $50 million. And, the Brock Purdy situation could still have its own twists and turns. But the 49ers certainly need to at least plan right now for the idea that next offseason they're going to have to pay Brock Purdy big-time quarterback money.
Yeah, they're hoping to have to pay him big-time quarterback money. And I do think the other piece of this is something that you talked about with Klay Thompson, which is timing. And for Klay, it just so happened that his contract was up coming off a 10 seed and in a situation where they were trying to get out of the second apron. So that was just bad timing. And I think for Aiyuk, it's a little similar in the timing of it where, you're really, really good right now as a Niner team, and you've got a roster full of really good players who are also highly paid. So there isn't as much money as there was 3 and 4 years ago when you didn't have this much depth in the roster.